right. So welcome everybody to the January edition of the InKY Reading Series. We are so thrilled that you have joined us. My name is Amy Miller. I am the Executive Director of Louisville Literary Arts, and we are welcoming two great writers tonight. Unfortunately, it was going to be three great writers, but Joy Priest let me know 2 days ago that she's very sick and she really regretted having to cancel, but we understand completely, and we hope that she feels better very soon and we can reschedule. So our first reader this evening is Lanelle Edwards, whose most recent collection of poetry is This Great Green Valley. I think I need my reading glasses. We're at that stage, guys. Okay. This is a chapbook of documentary poetry based on revisionist narratives of Kentucky's pioneer founding in the 18th century. She's published 3 additional full-length poetry collections, Covet, The Highwayman's Wife, and The Farmer's Daughter, all published by Red Hen Press, and a chapbook, Kings of the Rock and Roll Hot Shop. Her short fiction, book reviews, and essays have appeared in Another Chicago Magazine, New Madrid, Connecticut Review, Cincinnati Review, Pleiades, and elsewhere. She is the Associate Programs Director for Spalding University's School of Creative and Professional Writing, as well as faculty in poetry and professional writing and book review editor for the school's literary journal, Good River Review. Awards include a 2007 Al Smith Fellowship and a fellowship at the Hermitage in Sarasota, Florida for 2020-21. She's a founding member and past president of Louisville Literary Arts and also served on the Kentucky Women Writers Conference Board of Directors. If we could all just make sure that our mics are muted, we will welcome Lanelle to the virtual stage, and I'm going to put in the chat, if you aren't familiar with Zoom, there's a chat button at the very bottom of the screen. I'm going to put a link to Lanelle's book, and if you're interested in purchasing it, you can go to that link. Without further ado, Lynnell Edwards.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm going to be reading from my new collection, This Great Green Valley. Looks like that. And as Amy said, it's documentary poetry. I had the great opportunity to spend a semester working and researching at the Filson Historical Society in Louisville, where I was able to access lots of primary documents associated with Kentucky's pioneer founding. The project was sparked by interest in my own family, the McAfees, who explored in Kentucky and settled here in about 1775 or so. And when I got into the material about them, which I found a fair amount of pretty quickly, I also discovered lots of other oral histories that had been recorded in the early 19th century and lots of interesting documents that suggested a story a little bit different about what it was like on the frontier, which at that point was the great western territory of Kentucky, than what we learned in school and what popular narratives tell us about what it was like to be a pioneer. So I'm going to read the first several poems in the first part of the book, and then a little bit throughout. And then the second part of the book is a long poem that I'm going to read from that is set in contemporary times, or the recent past, really. All right, so this is called Settlers 1, and there are 4 of these in the book. And the book is ordered, the first half of the book is in chronological order. So this ranges from about 1739 till about 1792. Settlers 1, Jane McMichael McAfee, June 1739. All night on the waves rocking, the croup rattles our Malcolm's chest. All night I hear the wet sloshing in his breath's bellows, press him against my chest and feel the fever go cold. Morning, I wind and wind him in his white sheet, release his body to the deep, commend his spirit, namesake of that chieftain what has spawned us all. We lift our prayers to salt spray and the peaks of waves, bow forward toward unrepentant shores. So Jane McMichael McAfee and her husband, James McAfee, came across from Northern Ireland, Ulster, and the cost of that crossing was their infant son, Malcolm, who had been named for the original. So far as history tells us, the McAfee clan. The next poem is called John Swift Warns You of What You Seek. And in Kentucky lore, the hills in eastern Kentucky are supposedly full of silver. Maybe native tribes found it and mined it. Maybe stuff was buried there. It's really kind of the story of History Channel stuff, you know, right up there with pyramids built by aliens and, you know, mer people and stuff like that. At any rate, there's quite a legacy of treasure hunting for silver in eastern Kentucky and eastern Tennessee, and nobody's really found anything. But John Swift was a pirate or something, or sea captain or something that is associated with it. And there's supposedly a journal, and I found a contemporary reprint of this, like 1972 reprint of this journal. So that's already suspicious. That outlines the clues and the maps and the whole 9 yards. So here's an epigraph supposedly from that journal.
I'm not sure why Linnell's mic and video are frozen, but I'm going to text her and see if we can get her to log out and log back in. There we go. Jen is asking, while we're waiting, anybody here find silver in eastern Kentucky yet? That's funny. Okay, here she comes. Can you hear us, Lanelle?
You see me?
There you are, yes.
Golly, wouldn't you know what? How many Zoom meetings am I on? All right, I was telling you about John Swift. And I'm going to continue telling you about John Swift, the treasure seeker. The epigraph reads, from there through a bluffy region, thence from there to a cliff on the right, thence up a creek crossing the opposite direction of the cliff, thence through a bottom by an old Indian graveyard, etc. So this is in the voice of John Swift. Ugly business this, dead men and their treasure, my legacy ripped, Indian trader, pirate, man of faint allegiance to nation, God, who I did or didn't kill, blood some way spilled to get map or passage to Cherokee, Shawnee load, primitive kilns that smelt silver from ore, Boone, Filson, Herod, fevered with legend, disappear into this rough and cliffy country. Look for a peculiar rock where three creeks come together, sign of a triangle, sign of a compass, sign of a trowel and square. Haven't I said enough? I am blind at the end, the dim work of mining, its fires and salts. Or a duel robs me of my sight, the other fellow his life. Still, I point men panting for wealth, south or east by the feel of sun on my face. Some don't come back, none never get rich, no furnace never found, nor counterfeit sack of English crowns. More, Furnace Creek, Clear Creek, Cane Creek, look for a rock house, look for a hole. It's all in the journals. 50 poles south, look for a notched oak. Buffalo Rock, Sky Rock, Tabletop Rock. Have you no sense, no eyes to see? You'll get nothing more from me. Settlers 2. This was actually the first poem I wrote in getting interested in this material. Wild the minds of men, and green as the sun-charged canopy of trees, their fears of depredation and the savage tribes, betrothed left at home and drinking water. Evening, they go into the hollows, the caves carved by cold springs, seek shelter from the beasts, storm cloud and haint. At day, the lilt of their words shock the limestone cliffs. Ash stirred into flame boils coffee, chars meat. Then on to disturb, rattle, rattle the cane brake, tramp to high ground, hack a clear patch and arm it. So the documents tell me that Kentucky was founded originally in violence and a lot of greed, a lot of get rich. This is another McAfee poem, Settlers 4. They were originally a survey company, so they got their grants for land for service in the French and Indian Wars in the mid-late 18th century, and then went into the new territory on behalf of themselves and others they represented to stake out warrants for land that was presumably uninhabited and perfectly free for the taking. And they do that coming down the Ohio from southwestern Virginia and then down the Kentucky. And they mark off their land and then they proceed to think there's a shortcut back. We'll just follow the Kentucky River and see what happens. Well, what happens is they get lost and almost die. They obviously do get back, but this is a story much mythologized in the histories of the McAfees, that at the last moment they are saved by the last bullet in the gun that shoots a buck that happens to emerge, and then they can eat and they're saved. And the whole scene as it comes down to us is quite miraculous, but this is the truth as you read it in their journal. McAfee Company returns, Kentucky River, North Fork, August 1773. Upstream, south and east, so winds this current towards its source, so bends this stream into forks. We choose north, scramble over moss and boulder, fossil bed and shale flint, broken and loose underfoot. No Shawanai gold at that mouth, no Canaan foretold. Abode of desolation, we go thin and hungry, pitch a subsistence camp, and no one tells how men die squatting and alone. One of the very popular stories that comes down from these days, and then in fact is, I think, memorialized in the Kentucky State Capitol with a painting as part of the Capitol dome inside, is how Daniel Boone and some of the other fathers and boyfriends rush after their daughters who have been kidnapped and save them, and it's all very heroic, which it is. But this is another persona poem that comes in the voice of the mothers, who towards their daughters, of course, are desperately afraid and love them. But it's one of those things where you've got an older teenager who's done something so profoundly stupid and dangerous that when you get them back, you want to both shake the life out of them and hug them. The mothers of Elizabeth and Frances Calloway and Jemima Boone embraced them upon their return from capture by Indians, July 17th, 1776. How pressed by the heat were you that you thought it safe to wander toward river's bank, there to launch our light canoe, dare each other to tip it? How enchanted, laughing at your game, that you didn't hear the savage on his path? Haven't we always, always warned you with one ear toward the meadow's edge and one ear toward the station bell to bend? And how long do you suppose he and his band lay at their leisure watching you, watching the laces loose at your breast, your hair tumbled from its cap in the heat? Do not protest that you are as clever as woodsmen to snap twigs, leave your marks of ripped hem, ribbon. Do not think it but God's providence what saved you. These boys, these yet smooth-skinned boys, hot warriors in pursuits of their beloveds, as though they yet know what love might suffer. To rescue their maids, so they flew, and so too your fathers, their eyes blurred with rage and fear did follow. Do not think you are other still than foolish girls, even as you have had your trial, your 3-day tramp through this desolate wild. Even as you, Elizabeth, countenance grown dark from the sun, eye and cheekbones shadowed in fatigue, a red kerchief wrapped like a primitive crown around your brow. So but a father's hand, such a beloved, would have cleaved your skull, thinking you a long-haired savage, unholy creature meant to ruin his maid. Okay. I'm going to read now another poem, not long after the Kentucky Territory is more or less opened up. Then do real estate agents do their best to get it all and as much as possible by a whole lot of ways that are only marginally legal. And Kentucky is a great source of land speculation. And you read in their letters exactly how ravenous they are for more land. So this is called The Speculators, and it's written in a form called a villanelle, so you're going to hear it sound kind of repeaty. And there's 2 epigraphs. One of them says, I will have more rich land or I will cease to be. And that's a letter unidentified from Harrodsburg, 1780. And the second quote is, I have in contemplation a scheme. And this is from Isaac Height to his father, also a speculator, April 26, 1783. We will have more rich land or we will cease to be rightful lords of this pleasant land. Thus have we in contemplation a scheme for acquiring preemptions from those who cease to be, or those without improvements on their land, and so will be vulnerable to our scheme. Or in treating with what savage who may be reluctant to release his hunting lands, convince him sweetly of the fairness of our scheme. Or the disenfranchised who may wish to be themselves made liberated by our land, but will instead be indentured by our scheme. And if our creditors refuse to be expansive in their backing of our land, we will overrun their ledgers with our scheme. And for as long as our governors let us be, we will rule as masters of this land, territories gotten, stolen by our scheme, a vast country ours will always be. So that's how it started. The second part of the book, and now I'm going to change gears, and I'm going to write about a place that really is only probably 10 or 15 miles as the crow flies, as they would have said in the 18th century, from exactly where the McAfee settles, which is very near Harrodsburg, Kentucky, if you know Kentucky. And when I was young, I lived in a small town very near the Kentucky River, but not quite on it. And we had a boat. And we would go out on Saturdays and pleasure boat on the Kentucky River. I learned to water ski. And I have to give a shout out here because the co-stars of this poem, my mom and my dad and my brother, are here tonight as they were there in the boat many years ago. So it's called locking through. And just a quick technical note, to lock through is a particular process whereby a boat can enter a lock, they raise the water, and then you get above the dam and you can do that. The Kentucky River has, I think, 14 or 13 locks on it because as a way to make it navigable. So this is called locking through, and I'm not going to read it all because it's very long, but I'll close with that. I'll read the first page, or I'll read the first couple pages. Still and flat as summer days, the Kentucky River below Tyrone Bridge fills now beneath its green surface with silt and scree from the Palisades. The Corps no longer dredges this channel, has closed the locks that let barge traffic pass from one pool to the next and lift pleasure crafts through on weekends. Once upon a time, we put our boat in at Tyrone, backing down the narrow strip of county road that disappeared like broken teeth into green water. Steep, uneven, the buckled path was a trick of speed and angle, brakes against the heft of gravity, struggle of slick wheels to launch and not let the trailer wedge between the pavement edge and crumbling bank. My mother guided slow, slow, good, that's good, until at water's lip, she shoved the nose and muscled the dry stern over the stays. She held the tow rope slack, led the craft like a colt past the shore to deep water, tied it off at the dock and let the current carry the load. Once Saturday, my brother and I sit in the open bow of our Starcraft outboard, brace for the roar and plain, smile into the wind. We bump over boat wakes, wave at friends, cruise past Gilbert's Creek, past the Bluegrass Bridge dredge operations. We stop at Clifton for gas and sandwiches, where my dad makes the long climb from the plank dock, the whole project a hazard of splintered boards, frayed ropes, up moss-slick steps jammed into the steep bank, to a low-roofed shack that houses both man and enterprise, I suppose. We aren't allowed to go, but made to wait broiling in our life jackets while my dad pays for gas, never listens to our requests for snacks, emerges laughing after the transaction, the joke about green bologna cut with a rusty butcher knife, before telling us to hang on tight as we roar back into the river's deep center channel, flying at full plane. At the swimming spot by the limestone overhang near Clear Creek, we tie up to a slender tree rooted to a rough rock ledge. Fossils stud the shelf, the spirals and scallops of trilobites, nautilus, tiny ancient cephalopods, hieroglyphs, the story of what came before, the river roaring high, carving this canyon of steep palisades, the caves where tribal hunters camped, the earth compressed to flint chipped into blades, arrow points, hammers. The boat rocks on its wake and drifts toward the bank, then still. I jump over the side into green relief, an exaltation of limbs and breath, this birth into the strange gravity of current, never soon enough. I am mermaid, my hair loosed and living as tall field grass, drifting in the summer air. Wild hands, white hands luminous and slow, parting the water, eyes open, peering into silence, the dark distance. My brother and I take turns launching from the overhang, calling out spins, the name of superheroes, the highest splash, until coasted back into the water, we head to a stretch of sandy beach at the Lock 6 Dam. Thank you. That's where I will stop, since I have no idea how my technology glitch lasted.
If everybody wants to unmute and either, do some snapping, some clapping, you're welcome to. It's very hard to perform in front of an audience you can't really see or hear. So I like to give those opportunities. Before we move on to our next reader, I have a few things I want to tell you about. We have a lot of workshops coming up between this Saturday and the following Saturday. So if you are interested in signing up, I will just tell you a little bit about them. So this Saturday is the first of 3 free poetry workshops that are part of the Poetry Derby contest. Christy Maxwell from U of L will be teaching this first workshop from 10 to 12 in the morning. And the second workshop will be taught by Christina Ernie, and the third will be taught by Makalani Bondale. All 3 of them are fantastic poets and really excellent instructors. So I encourage you to take this free opportunity. You can check our website, which I will put in the chat for the dates, and sign up. It's free. There you go, it's in the chat. Next week, we have the rescheduled Writing and Healing class taught by Nancy McCabe. This class had to be rescheduled from December because of her illness, but she has so kindly offered, because not everybody can make the rescheduled class, that she's going to offer a second section of it February 27th. So that's happening Tuesday. On Thursday, the 21st, Diane April will be teaching Writing with Scissors. We have about 5 seats left in that class. This is a collage class, so you'll be cutting things out of magazines and making new work that's both image and words. And Diane and Nancy both teach, along with Lynnell, in the Spalding University School of Writing program. And our excellent instructors. Diane April used to be a longtime reporter for the Courier Journal, and both incidentally were my mentors when I was in the program, and I think very highly of their teaching. Lastly, next Saturday, the 23rd, Katerina Stoikova, whose name I always trip up, she is teaching a class on how to put a poetry collection together. And she knows very well how to do this because she is the publisher and of the Accents Press. She has put together many poetry collections and is a poet herself. She's a wonderful instructor, and what I'm going to do is just put a link to our website in case you're interested in any of these classes, and you can read more about them and decide if you want to sign up. Okay, without further ado, let me introduce to you our next reader, Susan Buttenwieser. Is that right? Buttenwieser. I did it. Susan Buttenwieser is the author of the short story collection We Were Lucky with the Rain from Four Way Books. Her writing has been nominated for a Pushcart Prize and appears in numerous literary publications. She contributes news features regularly to Women's Media Center and teaches creative writing at New York City public schools in high poverty neighborhoods and with incarcerated women and older adults. If you would like to purchase Susan's book, We Were Lucky with the Rain, I have a link that I'm putting in the chat where you can do so. Okay. So without further ado, please let's welcome Susan Buttenwieser.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And Lynnell, that was so beautiful. I'm so happy to be reading with you, and I'm just sad that Joy Priest isn't here as well, and I hope that she has a speedy recovery. I just wanted to also thank Four Way Books for publishing my book. And I just wanted to give a shout out to my friend Jay Gardner, who took the photograph that's on the cover. So I'm just going to read one of the stories in the, there's not really, the stories in the collection are just standalone stories. So I'm just going to read one of them. This is called The Last Supper. Even though it's only Thursday, Jack and his family are going to watch a movie tonight, his mother announces when he gets home from school. His father is going to choose the film. You can have a Coke to drink with dinner if you want. She mixes in a teaspoon of cold coffee into a bowl of chocolate icing. A freshly baked cake is cooling nearby on the counter. Even me? Tommy asks. Their mother always tells them that 5 is too young for soda. Even you, she says. He is so excited that he spills his apple juice. He thinks the cake and the soda with dinner and the movie on a non-weekend night are all good news. It's Daddy's special night, like when it's your birthday. She's down on all fours, sponging up Tommy's drink off the linoleum floor. He nods slowly as if he understands what she's talking about, except it's not their father's birthday. A month ago, Jack's mom told him and Tommy that their father got a new job, but it was so far away that he would have to move there. It would only be for a few years, she said, but she wasn't sure if they could visit him or not. Also, he was kind of nervous about his new job, and they must never talk to him about it. Remember, Tommy, when you were scared about the first day of school? Well, that's how Daddy feels. But Derek Winters, who lives across the street and used to be Jack's friend, showed everyone in the entire 4th grade the article in the paper. 2 to 5 years for grand larceny, the headline said. Although Tommy couldn't read yet and never saw the news, still, he was pretty confused by their mother's explanation. Tommy remembered not to ask their father anything, but he had a lot of questions for her. Where exactly was Daddy going? And what was his new job? And why couldn't they visit him? It made no sense. And he really couldn't understand why they didn't all move together like his best friend's family did last year when his father got a new job in California. When Tommy got going with the questions, their mom would scream a tsunami of angry words, and all 3 of them would wind up in tears. Then his mother would sit outside in the yard with a big glass of wine until it was dark and late and she forgot all about dinner. They'd eat cereal in a rush right before bed, the milk and honey nut Cheerios churning around in Jack's stomach while he lay under the covers, and it would take a long time to fall asleep. Jack had to do something to make Tommy stop. He told Tommy that their dad was actually a spy on a secret mission, and if he kept asking questions, Tommy could ruin the whole thing. Daddy is a superhero? Tommy asked. You can't tell anyone, promise? Jack said. And also, promise that you'll stop asking Mom about his new job. So finally, Tommy did. Jack knows that tonight his father will choose Finding Nemo, which used to be his own favorite movie until he outgrew it. But Tommy likes it, and Jack wants his dad to enjoy the evening, so he decides not to say anything. Besides, he's the big brother, and part of being the big brother is sometimes you do things when you don't feel like it, his mother keeps reminding him. Now that he's 9, Jack takes Tommy to and from the school bus stop. It's just on the next road, but he's the only one his age in the neighborhood who doesn't have a parent or some adult bringing them in the morning or meeting them later on. Sometimes the other parents whisper to each other when Jack and Tommy walk past. You know whose boys those are, don't you? One of the mothers said last week. He kept his head down and told Tommy to hurry it up and stop dawdling. I wasn't even, Tommy whined. Their father never eats breakfast with them anymore, stays upstairs waiting until they've left. On the way to the school bus in the mornings, Jack glances back at the house, trying to see if maybe his father is watching them from the bedroom, ready to rush out if anything bad happens. But the light reflecting off the windows makes it hard to tell if he's there or not. While they are finishing their after-school snack, his mother stops frosting the cake for a moment and suggests they go play in the yard so she can make sure to get everything ready in time for dinner. She looks Jack right in the eye while she talks and nods slightly. I'll call you when it's ready, okay? They never play in front of the house anymore. Derek Winters made Jack give him the new bike he got for his birthday. Derek Winters has a brother in high school who plays football, and his friends are always in their driveway shooting hoops or out in the middle of the street playing hockey. So Jack wasn't taking any chances. He gave Derek Winters his bike and told his mom that it got stolen, although she didn't seem that interested about what happened to it. Then Jack decided that the front of the house was off limits. It wasn't just Derek Winters and his big brother, or the swear words left in sidewalk chalk on their driveway. It was everyone. Even Derek's mom went after them. They were in the cereal aisle at Super Stop and Shop when it happened. Tommy was hassling their mother to buy Fruity Pebbles, and Jack braced himself for a full-fledged Tommy tantrum. Whenever that happened, everyone would stare at them as if they'd never in their whole life seen some kid be an idiot in a store. His mother was explaining yet again that Fruity Pebbles were unhealthy when Mrs. Winters appeared out of nowhere, wheeling her cart straight into theirs. Jack's mother stumbled backwards from the impact and almost lost her balance. You got some balls going on in public after what your husband did. Her black raincoat hung off her shoulders like a vampire cape. His mother's face turned pale and glassy, as if she might get sick to her stomach. Take Tommy and wait for me by the checkout lines, she said to Jack quietly, without even moving her lips. And for once in his life, Tommy dropped it about the Fruity Pebbles and interlocked his moist, dirty fingers with Jack's, leaning into him as they walked toward the cash registers. Jack tried to find something funny for Tommy to look at in one of those magazines that has pictures of 400-pound babies smoking cigarettes on the cover. He could still hear Mrs. Winters shouting at their mother, who didn't seem to be saying anything at all. Tommy covered his ears, shut his eyes, and bent over, rocking slightly like he used to in his crib when he was a baby. Jack stood over him, looking at the gum, feeling people's stares, as if they knew Jack and Tommy were connected to the commotion in aisle 8. Then boxes were toppling over and the manager was hustling Mrs. Winters out of the store. You're throwing me out? She was still shouting. She's the crook, not me. His mother's face was tight as she wheeled her cart toward her boys, and Jack didn't need to be told to take Tommy for a ride on the bucking broncos by the rows of shopping carts. Outside the supermarket, Tommy seemed to be focusing on something off in the distance while he sat on top of the plastic white horse. Thick gray clouds lowered in the distance, announcing an imminent thunderstorm. During the drive home, they played I Spy, and Jack let it go when Tommy claimed to see something with wings and called it a bald eagle, even though there weren't any. It has been dark for almost an hour before their mother calls out into the backyard that dinner is ready. Tommy rushes ahead. Jack props the rake up against the side of the house by the hose and the garbage cans. Lights are on in the nearby houses, and he can hear the din of a television, a dog barking. Inside, his father is at the kitchen table, his face fresh and smooth, and he smells like his Gillette shaving cream. He grabs Tommy, pulls him onto his lap. "Let me go," Tommy laughs and tries to squirm away, not noticing his father's grimace. Sometimes, after Jack has gone to bed, his father comes into his room and sits on the edge, and he can hear him crying. Jack lies still and pretends to be asleep, the bed moving with the weight of his father's trembling body. His mother baked meat lasagna from scratch for a change, as well as making the garlic bread herself, instead of the frozen kind that comes in plastic wrapping. The lasagna is on top of the stove, still hot, the melted cheese bubbling. It's his mother's idea for everyone to go put on pajamas, and then Tommy helps her spread out his tablecloth on the living room floor like they're on a picnic. Jack rifles through the movies in the cupboard next to the TV until locating the Finding Nemo box, but the DVD isn't in it. What if it's lost? That will set his mom off. He tries the pile of loose ones scattered on the floor, then the drawers. Finally, he sees it underneath yet another stack on top of the DVD player. He puts it in, turns on the TV, and cues it up. The food is so good, Jack has to stop himself from eating it too quickly, trying to linger on each bite to make up for all the nights they haven't had a real dinner. The plate of garlic bread is passed around, and Jack decides not to look at his dad in case he is crying, because that will make his stomach hurt, and then he won't be able to eat. And he wonders how long it will be until his mother makes something like this again. Jack dips the garlic bread in the tomato sauce, takes a bite of lasagna, then washes it down with Coke, piles some salad on the garlic bread. He has 2 more helpings, wiping up the sauce with the bread, then leans back to let the food settle. After everyone is finished, they all move onto the couch, leaving the dirty plates and dishes of food in the middle of the floor. "We can deal with this later," his mother whispers. Jack sits right between his parents, his brother pressed up against his mother on the other side. Then Tommy lies down with his head in her lap, and she strokes his hair, and Jack wishes she would do that to him, but he's too old, or at least he can't think exactly how to ask. Anyway, he's wedged tight in his dad's arms. "Who's ready for cake?" his mother asks after a while. Me, Tommy leaps up. "Okay, Tommy, that's enough." Even though it's dark, Jack can tell Tommy is getting on her nerves. More than anything, he wants to make it through the movie without his mother yelling and Tommy crying, because that will definitely make his dad lose it. "I'll help," Jack offers, hoping to divert attention away from his brother. He follows her into the kitchen, balancing some of the dirty dishes that they leave by the sink. "Can you get me some plates?" she asks him. "You guys like milk with this, right?" For a second, it looks like her face is going to crumple, but she manages to catch herself and returns her attention to slicing up the cake. "I forgot how much I like this movie," she says. She gets a tray and they put the plates of cake, milk, forks, and napkins on it. Back in the living room, Jack helps his mother pass out the cake before resuming his position tucked inside his dad's arms. This is Jack's favorite dessert of all times, his mother's homemade chocolate cake with a cold glass of milk. He's still full from dinner, but manages to get it down somehow. When it gets to the part near the end of the movie where Nemo finds his dad, they cling to each other. Everyone is crying, even Jack. "Come here, boys," their dad says when the credits roll. They curl up in his lap and he holds them close, his arms circling them. "Get the camera, Donna, please." While she's looking for it, Jack can feel his dad's chin on top of his head quiver. Trying to ignore his wriggling brother, he hugs his dad extra tight, taking in everything. The way his skin feels, his smell, the sound of his breathing. The lights are still off, and the blue glow of the television filters out over the remains of dinner. This moment is going to end soon, after their mother comes back into the room, takes some pictures, and sends them up to bed. Jack tries to freeze it so he can come back to it at a later time. The moment when they are still like this. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
So powerful and heartbreaking. I want to allow the audience to ask questions of both of our guests in a minute. And before I do that, I just want to make one more announcement, and that is that on Wednesday of next week, we are having our monthly writers meetup at 7 o'clock on Zoom. And please share this if you know any friends who would like to join a friendly and supportive group of writers who share work and give feedback in real time. So you can bring up to 2,500 words of fiction and nonfiction or 2 poems to share. And this is free to join. Let me get you the link. Just going to put this in the chat. And there you go. So I hope to see some of you there. Okay. So let's bring both Lynnell and Susan back. Mic's on. Does anyone have questions for both one or the other of our featured guests tonight? And
I have a question.
Yes.
It's about land in Kentucky and who got that land. So when people showed up with a warrant or thought that they had land in Kentucky that had been given to them either by the government or after they fought in the Revolution, who figured that out? Particularly if somebody else was already living on it. I mean, were there attorneys? How did that work?
Lots of different ways that don't always work out. Land in Kentucky was sometimes claimed to be owned by as many as 3 people. And there were various claims. And I think the McAfees at one point tried to put a claim in for their dead father. I think it was sorted out for a very, very long time. I've been doing some more research at the Filson and into some later family members into the 19th century who, in the background of some of the letters, there seems to be some other kind of dispute going on even about that then. So I think it went on for a very long time and wasn't always straightened out to everyone's satisfaction.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions?
I have a question.
Great.
Lynnell, I just wondered how you work in, I mean, it seems there's so much research involved in your poetry and your work. How do you, I just wondered like the process of doing research and writing poetry, like how you.
So I had the great luxury of a sabbatical semester that I was able to go down to the Filson Society, which is actually just down the street from where Spalding is located, and just start reading stuff I wanted to and kind of going down rabbit holes. I started with the McAfees, who you don't have to go very deep to find a little bit about them. They're not as famous as Daniel Boone, but they're kind of the second tier. So I had found some stuff pretty easily. And but I would go down other rabbit holes and find various accounts of this and this. So I could read kind of whatever I want, following whatever path I want, and without the without the burden of a real historian of documenting and so forth. The book does have an acknowledgments page where I say I consulted these sources and so forth. And just immersing myself in the material and seeing what sticks. I did write a lot of notes, and I would read a lot. And I guess I spent probably the first month of the sabbatical just reading and not really writing anything. And then at some point I knew a critical mass of stuff and I could write. But it took a while, and I had to kind of trust that, okay, I'm on my sabbatical, I'm not writing anything, nothing's happening. Oh, please happen. And the staff at the Filson is fantastic, and they would go and find archival material, and it's an amazing resource. And then I began to pulling together poems, and I realized that I had a good chapbook, and I pitched it to Larry Moore from Broadstone Books, who's on the call here tonight. And he was, that looks good. And I felt like after I had the Pioneer poems assembled that it wasn't quite substantial enough, even as a chapbook. There are about 20 Pioneer poems. And I had this other poem that's about 9 pages that I had been working on for a long time. And I thought, I think these could go together. They're geographically the same place, and they're about what it means for people to live in a place. And so I added that to it, and I think it makes the collection feel relevant in ways it maybe might not have if it was just the Pioneer poems. Not that there aren't tremendous collections of work like that. And I would point to, say, Frank Walker's book about York, which takes place at roughly the same time, really. The core discovery leaves right around the turn of the 19th century, from like 1805 or something like that. And it's the same vernacular. It's from the same part of the world. And there are other books as well. But for my purposes, I felt like I want to put this long other poem with it. So it was a lot of fun. It was a great process. And that documentary idea of recovering things. There are other kinds of poems in there. They're more collage-y or ekphrastic. Was a fantastic process for me. And I think, really interesting work. Thank you for asking.
That was amazing.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question to ask Susan or Lynnell? I actually have one for you, Susan. Just wondering where you find inspiration for your stories. That story in particular, I was just curious if it was drawn from personal, like a news story that you may have read, or a friend, or something real that had happened.
It actually was drawn from a newspaper article, but I teach writing in a women's prison, so I also sort of feel, I've been doing it for like over 12 years, and the pain that the women feel, most of them are mothers, and the pain that they feel from being separated from their children, it's like everyday agony, and like almost some of them, it almost seems like a physical pain. So I feel really aware of that pain. And so that's what, like when I saw that article, there was actually just an article about a family's last night before the father was going to start a prison sentence. And I guess also just the osmosis of being of being with the women for all these years, and just sensing that, that pain. And so I was just thinking a lot about, it just made me feel how just that night, the night before, how intense that would be. And also I really wanted to do it from a child's point of view and not either parent, because I just felt like the child would have some information, but maybe not all of the information, especially because the parents weren't able to tell them what was really happening, which is actually fair, like not uncommon for parents to try to somehow make up some crazy story like this family decided. So especially because they're, he's a little older and he wanted to protect, he feels the need to protect his brother. But so I think in some ways I was feeling I was just drawn to that idea because it seemed even scarier to be a child and know that this kind of awful thing is happening, that it's so awful that you're not being told the truth, you know?
Definitely.
Susan, I'm not necessarily one to always tell people what they ought to read, but I'm just going to sort of segue on
Yeah.
a work that I think you might be interesting. But one of the, I think, most important and interesting collections of documentary poem recently is C.D. Wright's One Big Self.
Oh,
And it is almost entirely found and composed language based on her almost ethnographic work with a photographer documenting the stories of 3 major women's prisons in South Louisiana.
oh, wow. Oh, thank you so much.
It's an astonishing book. And she has a preface that talks about, in some ways, what you're talking about too.
Yeah.
And the work itself is incredible. Robert, it looks like you were nodding, you know that work.
Yeah, I do love CD, right? Yeah. Definitely. Was also thinking of another writer I know who works in women's prisons teaching writing, but in Colorado. And she's Mairead Case. She's just published, I think, her 2nd novel. Yeah, I was thinking about her too.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, she's also a wonderful person. So.
Yeah. Thank you for those recommendations. Yeah, and I also write a lot about incarcerated women for Women's Media Center, and a lot of the issues around, you know, around incarcerating women.
That's great. Well, it was a very powerful story, and I love
thank
that you told it. I think it was that much more poignant from a child's perspective. So
Thank you.
and Lynnell, your pieces are so. I feel the leaves against my skin as I'm hearing you walk over the mossy. I mean, you just capture the landscape so beautifully.
Thank you.
And I'm sure that's from growing up there and visiting. Do you feel like the landscape has changed much from what you're researching? Is there much? How much, I'm wondering, is memory for you, and how much was research and putting together what the scene looked like?
So Central Kentucky, I mean, obviously has developed and settled. And so there's that difference in landscape. The Kentucky River actually has changed quite a lot in my lifetime, where the area where I was talking about, because as the poem opens, it says that the river is filling up. The lock system, the 14 lock system, they started closing all those locks in the mid 70s, late 70s, and they didn't dredge it anymore. So because there was no more coal barges, there were no more coal barges coming out of the mountains. And so they closed up those locks, the river starts filling up, and it's not quite the same river. Recently, they've opened, I think, locks 1 through 5 for some boat traffic. But that's actually been kind of remarkable. Because the banks of the Kentucky River is not really that developable where I'm talking about. It really is very steep, and you can put some houses and things, but it's not like the banks of the Ohio where you have miles of development and land. It's flat. It goes straight up. But it is, and that's happened in my lifetime. And so that whole community of pleasure boating that was so active when I was young in the early 70s is kind of gone, which is interesting. Sad, but
yeah, I think we all see that. Well, any last questions for our guests tonight before we go on our way?
Who's reading next month?
I was just going to tell you.
All right, I knew you. I was feeling all host-like,
Can you tell that Lanelle used to host this? So February 11th at 7 p.m. Eastern, we will be having Carter Sickles, Ellen Hagen, and Marco Rafala. So Carter is an instructor at EKU. Ellen is originally from Kentucky and lives in New York, and that is where Marco lives as well. It's going to be a really great night, mostly fiction. I think all three of them are reading fiction. That's just how it worked out, but I'm really excited. We've been, all three of us have been talking behind the scenes for quite a long time because last year Marco was supposed to come in March, just when everything shut down. So we finally got him. And I'm grateful for Zoom. And thank you everyone for coming tonight. I hope that you'll come back February 11th, and I hope to see you at some of our workshops, at our writers meetup. And if you need any information about the books that Lynnell and Susan have written, just scroll up in the chat and you'll find that information so that you can purchase their books. So let's give a round of applause to our guest tonight. You can unmute yourself for applause.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate
Thanks
it.
again. Yeah, it was great.
It was wonderful having you both. Thank you so much.
Thank
It was
you.
wonderful.
Night.
Thank you very much.
Night, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Goodbye.
Bye.